You know what we're missing in our culture when it comes to motherhood? Sacredness. A level of acknowledging just how life-changing pregnancy is, just how life-transforming it is to grow an entirely new human being in your body, basically from scratch. I watched a podcast episode where Chris Summers talked about a tribe where the women would gather around a birthing woman. And as soon as the first drop of blood from the birthing happened, they would receive that on a piece of cloth, rush out the room, and bury the cloth. And they would have a full ceremony for her, basically a funeral, crying and mourning and acknowledging that the person that they once knew no longer existed. And then they would return, reintroduce themselves, and allow her to re-enter the tribe as a new woman and a mother. I think the loss of rituals like this and the lack of acknowledging life transitions is part of why women in the US experience such a turmoil when entering motherhood. If you're new here, hi, I'm Sarah, a postpartum planner helping women be intentional during pregnancy and blossom into the version of themselves motherhood calls for. I believe how we perceive our realities directly influence how we behave and think about ourselves. So I do a lot of research to ensure that I can arm myself against any false narratives and reframe how I see myself on my motherhood journey. And I'm bringing all that information to you. So grab a cup of something good for you and let's get into it. Let's get on the same page on what I mean when I'm talking about rituals. I'm not talking about religion. I'm using the following definition: a sequence of actions or behaviors, often symbolic and performative, that are repeated to mark significance and create difference from the ordinary. So there are religious rituals like baptisms or bar mitzvahs. There are also rites of passage, which are rituals like weddings and graduations. And there are secular rituals like saying the national anthem. All of these acts involve a sequence of actions that are repeated to mark significance and create difference from the ordinary. And while I think we still connect with change and transitions on an intellectual level, we've left out the symbolic ways to help our emotional selves process the change. It reminds me of a quote that I came across once, and I think of it whenever I find myself intellectualizing my emotions. And it's that most of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel when we're actually feeling creatures that think. Rituals, in my opinion, provide a symbolic yet structured space for us to emote and bring forth what's happening inside. And it helps us to process and prepare and accept whatever change is happening. And when most of those changes are happening internally, I think it's that much more important to create an external environment that grounds us and helps those around us also acknowledge the changes that are happening. So there's a lot going on when you're pregnant. And there's a common misconception that people think that once you have a baby, 6 to 8 weeks later, you're all healed and you're back to normal, when that's not really the case. The 6 to 8 week checkup is when the top layer of an incision is usually closed. So that means that if you had a C-section or a tear, the top layer has probably healed, and that's what they're checking for. But the underlying tissues are still recovering. The uterus where the placenta was detached is still remodeling. A lot of work is actually still being done. I learned from my pelvic floor therapist that your uterus is actually still shrinking months later. So the 6-week mark is the beginning of recovery, not full healing, which actually takes about 18 months. And because pregnancy and childbirth can cause life-altering issues that sometimes don't show up until years later, some health professionals say that once you've given birth, you're forever postpartum. According to a 2021 NIH study, multiple physiological changes occur in pregnancy as a woman's body adapts to support the growing baby. And although these pregnancy-induced changes are important, the extent to which they reverse after pregnancy remains unknown. We don't even know if everything goes back to how it was. In a study published in Nature Neuroscience, revealed that during pregnancy, women undergo a significant brain remodeling that persists for at least 2 years after birth. And these changes are so clear that a computer algorithm could identify which women had been pregnant. And we feel that. I can't even count how many women on TikTok share that they didn't feel like themselves again until about 2 years postpartum. And that makes sense. The brain may not be the first organ that comes to mind when you think about having a baby, but it's one of the most important ones where the hormones that are being released are revising to prepare you for motherhood. And again, this is just a little that we know. Even though most women undergo pregnancy at some point in their lives, there's very little research focused on all of the changes and all of the anatomical brain changes that happen during pregnancy. And that is why we, moms, need to advocate for a shift in the culture for ourselves. Though we deserve more research and scientific explanations, we already know we are different. Because the way that I woke up one day in the middle of my second trimester and was fully ready to implement boundaries I had spent years trying to establish, I knew that I was different. We feel the difference from how we feel to how we think, even that to how our wants and our needs and our desires change and our priorities shift. So we need to bring back rituals and we need to give ourselves and our partner and our village a tangible way to identify with all of the changes that are happening inside of us. We need a way to give ourselves permission to step into this new chapter as who we've become because we're not the same, you know? And so I wonder, do you think you would have benefited from holding a ceremony to symbolize everything you were feeling that was happening inside before becoming a mom? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you in another video.